Right now, something at the Nürburgring feels completely different. Not because of the weather, not because of the crashes, not even because of the 24-hour race itself. Because Max Verstappen showed up, and suddenly, the entire event started behaving like Formula 1. And honestly, that was never supposed to happen here. The Nürburgring 24 hours has always been chaos, pure endurance racing. GT cars, amateur drivers, fog, forests, rain, darkness. A place where reputations disappear very quickly. This track does not care who you are. Yet before a single competitive lap even happened, Max had already changed the entire scale of the weekend. On Wednesday, during the traditional Adenauer parade through the town streets, organizers made a decision nobody expected. Max Verstappen was told not to attend. Not by Red Bull, not by Mercedes, by Nürburgring officials themselves. Why? Because the crowd around him had become too dangerous. Think about that for a second. This race has existed since 1970. Legends like Niki Lauda, Nelson Piquet, and endurance specialists have all raced here. But now, one active Formula 1 driver arrives, and security concerns become serious enough to remove him from a public event entirely. His number 3 Mercedes-AMG GT3 still rolled through the streets. His teammates, Jules Gounon, Lucas Auer, and Danny Juncadella, greeted fans normally. But Max stayed away. And honestly, that tells you everything about how massive this weekend has become. Because this isn't just another endurance race anymore. This has turned into a global Verstappen event. For the first time in Nürburgring 24 hours history, Saturday tickets completely sold out before the race weekend properly began. Camping sites filled up, traffic warnings were issued, fans were told not to travel to the circuit without tickets. An estimated 300,000 people are expected around a 25-kilometer track in the middle of the Eifel Mountains. And the craziest part? Max Verstappen still hadn't completed a real qualifying lap yet. The Formula 1 audience followed him into GT racing, and suddenly, the Nürburgring became the center of the motorsport world. But what happened next made the crowds feel completely irrelevant. Because once qualifying started, the green hell reminded everybody why this circuit scares even professionals. Thursday afternoon, qualifying won, and within minutes, the Nürburgring started doing what it always does, breaking cars. Now understand something, Nürburgring qualifying is nothing like Formula 1. This isn't one clean session on a predictable circuit. This is 25 kilometers of blind corners, changing grip, traffic everywhere, and weather conditions that can completely change from one section of the track to another. 161 cars entered the event, the biggest field in years. GT3 cars, touring cars, production-based machines, amateur drivers, factory professionals, all sharing the same piece of asphalt. The track temperature barely touched 8 degrees Celsius. Damp patches were hiding offline. Visibility kept changing corner by corner. And then, chaos arrived. Early yellow flags started appearing almost immediately as cars slid through the opening laps. But one incident changed the entire atmosphere of the session. A damaged Porsche came to a halt on the Grand Prix section with smoke pouring from the engine. The driver climbed out safely and stood beside the barriers while marshals reacted. But at the Nürburgring, visibility disappears instantly. Seconds later, another car arrived at racing speed. The driver barely had time to react. The impact was enormous. Debris exploded across the circuit. The stranded Porsche burst into flames. For a moment, everybody watching stopped breathing. Thankfully, both drivers walked away safely. But moments like that explain why drivers call this place different from anything else in motorsport. Because here, the track never gives warnings. 1 second you are chasing lap time. The next second you are arriving at a wall of smoke and fire at over 200 kilometers per hour. And in the middle of all that chaos, Max Verstappen climbed into the number 3 Verstappen Racing Mercedes-AMG GT3. No special treatment, no shortcuts, just another driver entering the green hell. At first, the timing screens looked normal. Specialists like Nicky Katzberg and Maurice Schurring traded fastest laps while Verstappen settled in. Then, the Mercedes started getting faster, and suddenly, the entire paddock started staring at the timing screens. Because what happened next? Nobody at the Nürburgring expected this quickly. At first, Max looked human. Traffic disrupted laps. Yellow flags interrupted momentum. The number 3 Mercedes briefly dropped outside the top 10. For a moment, it looked like the Nordschleife was doing exactly what people expected, humbling an F1 driver. Then Max came back into the pits. Quick setup changes. No driver swap. He wanted another run. And when he went back out, something changed completely. The Mercedes suddenly looked alive underneath him. The steering inputs became sharper through fluid plots. The car rotated aggressively through Flansgarten. The confidence level skyrocketed. And honestly, this shouldn't have been surprising, because this wasn't his first warning shot at the Nürburgring. Last time Verstappen raced here in a GT3 car, he led the entire field for 90 straight minutes, in traffic, in darkness, against factory endurance specialists. Then a broken splitter during the pit cycle destroyed the race. That kind of memory stays with the driver. And now, he looked like he wanted payback. Lap after lap, the pace increased. First in 8:47, then quicker, then suddenly, 8 minutes 18.539 seconds. The timing screen updated, and Verstappen's name jumped to P1 overall. For a brief moment, on his very first proper Nürburgring 24 hours qualifying weekend, Max Verstappen was fastest of everyone, against drivers who have spent entire careers learning how to survive this place. And here's the scary part. The sister number 80 Windward Mercedes eventually went faster to secure overall P1. But that car had cleaner air, fewer yellow flags, and more consistent track conditions. Max did his lap in traffic, with interruptions, on a constantly changing circuit, and still went fastest before the rest of the field could even react. By the end of the session, the number 3 Verstappen racing Mercedes finished third overall out of 161 entries. Not bad for an F1 driver supposedly learning. But honestly, the scariest moment of the weekend wasn't the lap time. It was what happened once the sun disappeared. As evening arrived over the Eiffel Mountains, the Nürburgring became something else entirely. Rain returned, temperatures dropped, fog started rolling through sections of the forest, and then came hail. Actual hail. Commentators started calling it the White Hell. Most teams stayed cautious, some barely wanted to risk their cars. But this session mattered for one reason: night driving. Because for the first time in his entire real-world racing career, Max Verstappen was about to attack the Nürburgring completely in darkness. No floodlights, no visibility, just headlights cutting through forests at over 250 kilometers per hour. And somehow, Max sounded excited about it. He described the feeling as, "You're completely on your own, pushing in the dark." That quote tells you everything about how his brain works. Most drivers hear danger. Max hears freedom. And this wasn't even his first warning sign here. Back in September 2025, Verstappen entered his very first GT3 race at the Nürburgring, and won, on debut. The pattern never changes. And honestly, we already saw this exact story before, in Japan. At Fuji Speedway, Verstappen jumped into a brutal GT500 machine during terrible rain conditions. At first, engineers were laughing. He stalled the car leaving the garage. Instructions were flying at him in Japanese. The circuit looked like a river. For a few moments, he looked uncomfortable. Then suddenly everything changed. Within 2 laps, Verstappen adapted completely. And when the timing screens updated, he was nearly 2 seconds faster than the professional Super GT driver whose entire career revolves around that car. 2 seconds. That is not adaptation. That is instinct. And now the Nürburgring is starting to feel exactly the same. But the real reason Max is here this weekend goes far beyond one qualifying session. People still keep asking the same question. Why is Max Verstappen even doing this? He's already a multiple-time Formula One world champion. He could spend free weekends resting. Instead, he's voluntarily driving one of the most dangerous endurance races on Earth. And the answer is actually very simple. Formula One is no longer enough by itself. Max said it himself, "I don't need to be only an F1 driver." That sentence explains everything. Because this isn't some celebrity appearance. This isn't marketing. This is a driver chasing something pure again. Real traffic, real unpredictability, real danger. That's why he built Verstappen Racing. That's why he kept sim racing despite criticism. That's why he quietly spent years preparing for the Nordschleife before anybody realized how serious he was.
And now, the scary part is how natural all of this already looks.
Top 3 pace, comfort in changing weather, instant adaptation. Even endurance veterans are starting to notice it. Because normally, Nürburgring rookies survive. Max Verstappen arrived, and immediately looked competitive enough to fight near the front. And honestly, that should terrify the rest of the field. Because once the 24-hour race actually starts, this stops being about one lap. It becomes about endurance. Darkness, fatigue, traffic, chaos. Exactly the kind of environment where instincts matter more than preparation. And right now, Verstappen's instincts look frighteningly good. But none of this actually started at the Nürburgring. It started in Japan, when Max jumped into a GT500 monster and destroyed a professional driver by nearly 2 seconds in the rain. Because that was the first real sign that Max Verstappen might be becoming something even bigger than Formula One. But honestly, none of this chaos actually started today. It started in our previous video. Max Verstappen just broke Nürburgring, 24 hours before racing even started. That was the moment everything began. The sold-out tickets, the fan chaos, the parade security concerns, and the first signs that Verstappen was turning Nürburgring into something much bigger than a normal GT3 race.
And now, he's suddenly terrifyingly fast as well. If you missed that part of the story, the video is on your screen right now. Click it, because this entire Nürburgring storyline makes way more sense after watching that first.